Welcome back to episode 2 of the Sun and Soul podcast. I'm your host, Brianna, and this is a place where we explore the world of psychic abilities and intuition. Today, we'll be diving into the fascinating topics of clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance, and others you may have never even heard of.
Now, this is the collective reading we're going to start off with. Just a reminder to you, the audience, this is for us, the host, as well. It's a way for us to set our intention for the week and to see what the universe has in store for us. So let's get started.
Wow, going in strong. I shuffled the cards and one already immediately came out. So I think that immediately, Spirit's not playing around. They know what we need to hear. Oh, there's 2. Yeah. We're getting a 2 for you guys.
Wait, there's one more under there. There's 3.
There's 3? Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that the first one that I picked up was the Lover's card. So I feel like this week we're focusing on a love connection. And then we have the Page of Wands and the King of Wands. This is really interesting. So, oh my gosh, you guys. I thought we were going to do one card, but Spirit wasn't playing around. So let's tap into this energy. Okay, once again, I'm hearing Sagittarius. And I know in the last week's episode I said Sagittarius, but I feel that energy very strongly. And I feel like it's the time of year. So you could, of course, be a Sagittarius, but I feel like this is going to manifest by Sagittarius season, but I think it's going to begin now, if that makes sense. I'm also hearing Virgo, and I'm hearing Leo and Sagittarius. So those zodiac signs could be significant for you or a lover or any other person in your life, because I'm seeing the Lover's card. That's what came out here. So let me tune in here and see what these other cards are telling me, because they're wands, and we know wands are about manifestation. They're about action. And I almost feel like you two are going to come together as a united front, and you're going to make something happen together. And it's going to manifest by Sagittarius season, okay? So those of you who aren't familiar with the zodiac timeline, we are in Leo season right now. We have Leo, then Virgo, then Libra, then Scorpio, then Sagittarius season. So this is like right around the end of the year.
Christmas time.
Yeah, Christmas time. This is right around the end of the year that this is going to manifest. I think this is honestly beautiful. This is beautiful energy that I'm feeling. It's 2 people coming together who are going to make a dream happen. That's the kind of energy that I'm feeling. So I think that this is saying that this week, if you have any ideas that pop into your head, any people that come to you with an idea, if your spouse, person that you're dating, anyone that comes to you with this idea, like, hey, let's do this, let's try this, a spirit saying all green flags, you should do it. Of course, listen to your own intuition, but this reading that I'm feeling is saying that this is a time for dreams to come true. In the love department. So
that's nice.
Yeah, that's what I'm feeling. So Kelly, go ahead and pull an oracle card. And once again, her oracle cards have the zodiac signs on them. So if she pulls a zodiac sign that matches any of the ones I say again, her deck is really magical. It tends to do that, but I'll freak out.
Okay, so full moon in Leo. It's funny because we just had a new moon in Leo.
Mm-hmm.
And the message is go wild. So really, go for it.
Go wild.
Yeah.
I said Leo. That was one of the signs that, and so.
Yeah, so the time is now. Full moon energy is very wild. Go wild.
Yeah, and there's 2 wands that came out, and wands have to do with the fire signs. So I think, now is definitely the time.
Yeah.
Go for it, guys.
Go for it.
Most people have heard of clairvoyance, but in more recent years, the spiritual community has come up with other terms to define the spiritual gifts mediums and psychics have that help them contact the other side. Many people possess these gifts without even knowing it. You've probably heard of intuition, and we're going to start with the oldest and most well-known.
We're going to be going through the different types of what the spiritual community calls the clairs one by one. So we're going to start with the most well-known clair, clairvoyance. It is a French word, as you could probably tell. Clair meaning clear, voyance being sight. So it literally translates to clear sight. There are 3 types: past, present, and future. Past being retrocognition, present remote viewing, and future being precognition. The first record of it being used was in 1784, but obviously prophets, oracles, seers predated the term. Now, mediums use it kind of as a catch-all term for the different types of gifts. We're going to go into all the different types of clairs so we can be specific about what mediums and psychics are doing with their gifts, how they're channeling, and how you channel, Brianna. For our listeners out there, How do you differentiate between imagination and true clairvoyant experiences, your visions, your third eye? Because they don't come to you in a way where you are always seeing something in the physical realm, right? Sometimes it's more like something that pops into your head.
Yes, I like to describe it as, well, obviously, yes, you're seeing it out of your third eye, but I like to describe it as it's a daydream, and it's a daydream that you don't have to make happen. You're receiving it. It's like you're watching it like a TV screen. And I'm going to share some of my stories that I have because I'm going to share two things that happened before I realized I was psychic. And now, hindsight, it's like 100%. I know I was seeing spirit. And then I'll share something after I realized. So the first thing, and these are very personal experiences. I could go on and on and on about readings I've done, but I want to share these personal experiences because I think they're really cool. So I was 19. My grandma had passed away, and this was the very first Thanksgiving we had without her. Mind you, I don't know I'm psychic or anything like that. We're at my aunt's house, and we're all standing around the kitchen, and all of a sudden, I feel an energy at the front door. And I see, now out of my third eye, but it was clear as day. It was like a vision. Like, it was like I was daydreaming, but totally came to me out of nowhere. I see my grandma walk in the front door. She kind of bends her knees a little bit, has her hands like jazz hands, and she goes, "I'm here." And I remember I was like, oh my gosh, like, we called her Mama. So I was like, Mama's here. Because we were just all like bummed out that it was the first holiday without her. And I'm seeing her walk through the front door. But remember, I don't know that I'm psychic or a medium at this time. And so I'm thinking, that was weird. That was a weird daydream. I'm thinking I'm just a daydreamer, right?
Yeah.
So I stop and I tell my mom and my aunt immediately. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just saw this. And they're like, that's her. That's Mama. Mama's here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't believe in it. I'm like, I'm thinking, because you see all the psychics on TV and stuff, and they're like, oh, I see so-and-so next to you. They make it sound as if, the person's almost materialized.
As if it's the movie The Sixth Sense, where you're seeing someone as clear as day, and that's not always
how it was subtle, but it was enough to get my attention, and it was enough to where that was not the norm.
Yeah.
Like, if I were to say, hey, daydream that your grandma is walking through that door, you'd have to consciously think about it, right? This was like just totally received. So that was a big one, because that was right after my spiritual journey really began. Because when she died, that's when I started reading those books and trying to really figure out, do we live on, you know? So that was a really cool one that will always stick out in my head forever. The second one, speed up a little bit. This was after I had my first daughter, Lacey. She's probably like 18 months old. My husband and I, we go to the flea market, and there's this dollhouse, and it was so cheap. And I was like, oh, that's a really cute dollhouse. I can fix it up for Lacey. And when she's old enough to play with dolls, she'll think it's really cute. So, we get the dollhouse, we bring it back, and I'm sitting in our dining room, and I'm fixing it up, I'm painting it. Now, all of a sudden, same thing that happened with my grandma. I'm sitting there, and I see someone, I feel an energy through the doorway in our dining room, as if somebody were coming into the dining room. So I look over to be like, who's coming in? And once again, out of my third eye, I see an older woman. She looked to be about in her 60s. She had gray, straight hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She had a white baggy shirt on, and she looked like she bit her nail. I mean, this was vivid. Yeah. Vivid. And I was not thinking about this. I was thinking about working on the dollhouse. There's no reason I would think this. She bit her nails, so I could tell that her nails were like stubby, and she was a smoker, and she had a cigarette in her fingers. She kind of had a raspy voice, and so she walks into me and she goes, "You having fun playing with my dolly house?" And then she went away. Oh God. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. I was like, that was weird.
That is so wild. You had never told me that story before. I had never heard that one.
Yeah, probably because it was a while ago, and I was like, people are going to think I'm crazy.
Well, and you have so many more stories after learning how to do this and honing in on your abilities and everything. So is there a story that stands out to you, that's special to you or meaningful to you?
Yes, this one is also very personal, and I'm so glad that experience has happened, because now I know that this one is real. And it was when I was pregnant with my very last baby, Breck. No one knew I was pregnant yet. I was like 4 weeks pregnant, very early. He was a surprise. We were done. Yeah. So nobody even expected a third baby. And I remember we were going to tell my parents that I was pregnant. So we went next door to my parents' house, and my dad's dad, he died when I was like 5, like very young. So I didn't really remember him that well. We're sitting in the kitchen, and I'm getting ready to tell my parents that I'm pregnant. All of a sudden, I see him in the kitchen.
Oh my gosh.
And he had on, it was so vivid, once again, he had on black pants, a white button-up shirt. He had kind of like, white gray wavy hair and big glasses. And he had kind of like a beer belly. And he was holding a beer in his hand. And then he puts it up to his mouth. He drinks it. And I taste the beer in my mouth. And so then I was like, oh my gosh. And I just realized he came because I was about to tell my dad that I was pregnant. And he wanted to be there for that moment. And it was really beautiful because I knew without a doubt that's just something special because I know that really was him visiting.
That's
and, you know, and
so
then I asked
cute.
my dad afterwards. I was like, oh my gosh, guess who's here?
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, huh?
Yeah.
You know, like not expecting that. And I was like, did Grandpa Miller really like beer? Why? That's however they show up to you. I feel like is significant.
Yeah.
Like why would he show up drinking a beer?
They want to show you something about them.
And my dad said he loved beer.
Yeah.
He drank beer every day. And I'm like, oh.
Every day.
That's why I love beer. I get it. It comes from the family.
Yeah.
But, yeah. And so it was just, and then, then I shared that I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Everyone was
That's
excited.
so sweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about claircognizance. So this is very common. Most people experience claircognition in their life and talk about it without even knowing this is a form of channeling. Claircognizance is the ability to know information without any logical explanation. It's a knowing, a gut feeling, commonly called intuition. How do we trust this, and how do we validate claircognizant insights? Really great example that you mentioned earlier. Write it down. Date it, write it down.
Mm-hmm.
You will see how things play out, and you can put the puzzle pieces together on if this is true intuition or making things up. But I think, honestly...
Or just listening to it, because so many people say, well, I just had this gut feeling, and they listen to it, they follow it, and they're immediately reaffirmed.
Yes, so I think the most common that I hear people saying they experience claircognizance is through cheating partners.
Oh, yeah. You see a lot of those stories online.
They're like, I just knew. A lot of people can relate to that. I just feel like everyone always talks about that, like, I just knew. But I think that you probably have a fun story to share.
I do. Well, I have a couple. We were at lunch one time, and you were telling me about how your mom just had a bad feeling about, if she had a bad feeling, she'd be like, you're not going to that party. Or whatever. And I like never learned to listen to my intuition. And I was leaving lunch, the kids in the back of the car behind a semi-truck, and I got this weird feeling, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to follow this thread and see what it means. Fall back is what I heard. And I'm driving behind the semi-truck at a safe distance. So I fall back a couple car lengths, like several. All of a sudden, it slams on its brakes and the back starts skidding. This guy has to pull off the road. And I was very comfortable with getting in the opposite lane. But if I had been 2 or 3 car lengths behind, it could have been a dangerous situation for me and my family. So that's another one I think that people talk about a lot is mother's intuition.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I think that it's interesting because with that experience with you...
People don't think of mother's intuition as psychic or claircognition, but...
Oh, it's 100%.
What else would you call it?
I think that just the reason why mother's intuition is so talked about is because mothers listen to it.
Yeah.
I think everyone has it, though.
I would assume fathers probably have it, too. They just don't share as much.
Oh, I think everyone has it.
Yeah. Or they don't share the stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I think with women bond by talking.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have just more opportunities to share these stories.
Our male listeners, share your stories. Share with your people. Yeah. I have a great story, too, of my friend. Got a phone call from her mom, like 3 a.m. And her mom said, something's wrong with your brother. And my friend said, what? What is it? She goes, I don't know. Her mother woke up with a terrible feeling, knowing something had happened to her son. Are you with him? And she said, no. Turns out that night he had been in an almost deadly car accident. Paramedics, EMT, they do not know how he walked away from that. She knew. She woke up in the middle of the night and knew. Mm-hmm. It's so many people have stories like this. It's amazing.
It's energy. The one example that I have is actually knowing that you were pregnant with your second child. And this is funny because I don't know if you remember it, and it's kind of fuzzy.
I don't remember it.
It was so long ago, and this is, once again, I don't think I even was practicing with tarot yet. So I was, squeaky with it. Yeah. But I remember we were sitting in my living room. There was no reason for me to think you were pregnant because you were on birth control. This was like a miracle baby.
Oh, yeah.
We were sharing like when we were going to try for our next baby. And so it's not like she was telling me these things. I knew that she was on birth control. So there's no reason I would think this. But we were sitting in the living room and we were talking, and out of nowhere, I just had this knowing she's pregnant. And I'm like, that is weird. I honestly just brushed it off the time because I was like, no, she's not. I know she's not. We had this conversation about when we're going to have our next, or when we're going to try. Yeah. And I know she's on birth control. And I know, like, that was so weird. Yeah. And so I think, like, a couple days went by, and I actually told my husband, Tyler, I was like, I think Kelly's pregnant. And he's like, why do you think that? And I was like, I don't know.
I love your impression of that. It's so funny.
Okay. That was weird. I don't know. I don't remember what he said, but I was like, yeah, it is weird. And then I think like 3 days went by and we were hanging out and we were like, oh, do you want to have a drink? And you were like drinking water, like sparkling water, when everyone else was like having a drink. And I was like, That's weird because I just had this knowing that she was pregnant. And so then I think I decided to ask you, and you kind of just looked at me.
I'm really bad at keeping secrets.
I think we actually went to the pool with the kids, and I was like, "Are you pregnant?" And you were like,
"Oh yeah,
yeah." And
now
you
I
were
remember
like,
that.
You were like, "Can I tell you something?" And I was like, "You're pregnant," and you're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
You didn't ask me. I remember going to time. Like I remember saying, "Can I tell you something?" And you guessed it.
Yeah, I was like, "You're pregnant."
I forgot about that.
I was like, "I know. Spirit told me 3 days ago," but I don't think I actually shared that much detail because I was still not even trusting my intuition at the time. But yeah, that's my claircognizance story. I honestly have a lot though.
Yeah,
but
and there's a lot of stories I feel like of other people experiencing that I just knew. You know?
Well, when I met
my husband knew when I was pregnant. I went downstairs and he was working and he said, I just knew in that moment that you were pregnant, even though I had absolutely no reason to be
just
pregnant.
Picked up on your energy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people have that.
He might have just read my face. It felt like he just read my vibe. Like there was something he was like, he knew I had to tell him. Surprise.
I think so.
Yeah. The next clair we're going to be talking about is clairaudience or clairhearing. If you've ever had a psychic reading or you've seen a documentary about a psychic, you probably have seen them say something along the lines of, I'm hearing the letter, I'm hearing the name. It's a very common for mediums. You were telling me earlier that this is one of the most common. And how is it different than inner thoughts?
With your inner thoughts, I feel like, and this is kind of goes hand in hand with when we talked about clairvoyance with a daydream, you just receive it. You don't think it. A lot of times, it's like, are we thinking our thoughts or are we receiving our thoughts? So whenever I'm reading for someone, I'll be tuned in and I'll be open to any of the senses that want to come to me psychically. And sometimes, I'll hear a month in my head and it sounds like my thought, but it's like, well, I wasn't thinking March. Yeah. Why did March pop in my head, you know? And then I'll ask them, is March significant? And, maybe it's a birthday month. Maybe they met their spouse. Maybe they have an anniversary. You never know. I always don't know how it connects, but my sitter does. Yeah. So I just share what I get and trust that, it means something to them. Yeah. Sometimes I'll hear names. I had that happen one time. I was actually doing a group reading. Yeah. And some of the people that were at the group reading had never had a reading before. And were just going for fun. They just thought, oh, a psychic. Like, they thought it was like a show. Yeah. They didn't know it was like, I'm going to really tap into your energy. Yeah. And I remember I was sitting there and I said, I'm hearing the name Wendy. This is somebody who is a little bit overweight, has short, dark hair, and has circulation issues. And the room was silent. I'm thinking like, oh, geez, like,
you're not on the right lead.
Yeah, am I not, like, what's happening here? Yeah. And so then I asked Spirit, I'm like, give me something else. And they're like, no. This is it. And it kept looping in my brain. And I was like, anyone? This person's not going away. Like, I'm hearing Wendy. Yeah. And so then the daughter of the mom says, hey, that's for my mom. And I'm like, what? Because I'm wondering why she isn't talking. And I'm like, oh, does Wendy resonate for you? And she goes, I'm sorry. I was just in shock. I didn't know this was going to happen. Wendy's my sister. Wow. And she looks just like you said, and she does have circulation issues. Oh. Well, she was alive. Yeah. So Spirit was bringing up someone who was alive, and it turns out that they were estranged. They weren't talking. Oh. And Mom was coming through and saying they need to mend the relationship.
Wow. That's amazing. See, and this is cool for our listeners, too, because you kind of wonder when you see a psychic, I always know, like, okay, are they pulling out some tricks out of a bag or something? So it's kind of cool. This is one of the reasons why we're doing this episode, so that if you do pay money to go and see a psychic, or if you're experiencing these gifts yourself, you can kind of know this isn't coming out of nowhere. You're not alone in this. But also, if you are going to see a psychic, and you hear them say these types of things, these are the type of things that they're talking about when they say, I hear the month of.
Yeah. There was another one where somebody wanted to connect with their grandma. And so, sometimes when people tell me something very specific like that, I have a problem trusting, because I'm like, well, I already know it's your grandma. I didn't give that information to you. So then I tell the Spirit, I'm like, make it good. Yeah. Give me something so that we can validate this experience.
Validate.
For me, too. I want to know that I'm really on the right track here and I'm really tapping into that person's energy. Yeah. So I see her and I said, okay, I'm seeing this very thin, frail, old woman with, short, gray hair. But I'm like, I was wanting more than that, because I was like, that's your grandma. There's a lot of grandmas that look like that. So then I hear the word Albania.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Albania.
I remember you telling me about this.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's specific.
Yeah.
So then I tell my sitter, and she goes, yeah, she's from Albania.
That's so cool.
And I'm like, oh, thank you. I was like, thank goodness, because I wanted to know, and I was like, that is good. Like, and you know, how would I know that she was from Albania?
Because I've had a reading where they're like, she's playing cards, she has an infectious laugh, and I'm like, you have to give me something more. That I have high expectations. You have to like ask, and you do this. I've heard Tyler Henry, who's very famous and very successful psychic medium, he also does this. You ask for something that's validating. I don't think everyone does.
Well, there are evidential mediums, and then there's just mediums.
And when we talked about how we want to do an episode, and we will, on how to spot a fake.
Yes.
Because, I mean, we've gotten fake readings before. If somebody ever tells you you're not allowed to record this because a spirit's going to get trapped in your phone, they're lying to you. Don't listen to that
our next episode's going to be about mediumship.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
but we could do a whole episode on bad readings we've had or people who weren't connecting. I need a first and last name. I need you to tell me how they passed. I need a picture.
I need to know everything.
Yeah. And you're like, and then they're like, here's the message they're sending you from the afterlife.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have said nothing.
Yes.
Don't like that.
Now, being, you know, so sensitive to energy now, when I get a reading, before they even begin, I know if they're real or not. Because I can feel, I almost can pick up on what they're going to say.
You can tell when you're getting a psychic reading.
When I'm getting a psychic reading.
Whether or not the person is channeling.
Yes.
Because it's a vibe shift for you and your body.
Yes. And
that's
then
really
I can feel it with them.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I can even guess what they're going to say.
That's really cool.
If I'm, like, tuned in. If I'm just listening and I'm busy, I won't. But if I'm, like, tuned in with them, I could be like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they haven't even finished their sentence yet. Because it's like, I'm picking up on that energy, too.
That's very cool. Yeah.
So these are some signs that you yourself could definitely be clairaudient. And remember, these samples I'm going to tell you, they're going to be very subtle. Pay attention. So the first thing is thoughts popping into your head out of nowhere. They're thoughts that you receive, not that you think. That's one sign. The second sign is ringing in the ears, okay? Now, of course, there can be physical symptoms of why this is happening, so if you are having ringing in the ears, this is not medical advice, but there is a chance you could be clairaudient. And then hearing messages through song lyrics. I'll have it where I'm about to do something, maybe a reading, or maybe I wake up for the day and there's a vibe, and then this song plays in my head, and it's a song that I haven't heard in years. I'll play it, and then I get a message after listening to it. And sometimes the song lyrics just puts me in that vibration I needed to be in to get the message.
You can keep an open mind and ask yourself later, kind of reflect on it. Why would this come to be?
Yeah.
But as far as going through thoughts popping in your head too, I know one example is people who kind of learn to listen to this. They say that they notice that these thoughts might be in a different cadence or than their just regular thoughts. You know,
I will say it's very monotone. It's very just matter of fact with no emotion.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to clairalience. I think a lot of you guys have probably had this one and you didn't know that you were experiencing this. And this is clear smelling. So have you ever had it where you just smell grandma's perfume out of nowhere, or you smell roses, or you smell the coffee brewing, and there's no reason? If you've experienced that, you've experienced clairalience. There was a time where I was doing a reading, this person that I was reading for, and I kept smelling cigarette smoke. And it was becoming so, and no one in my house smokes. I don't smoke. Like, there's no reason why I should have smelled cigarette smoke. But it was so strong that I actually started coughing. And so I was like, I'm not just, like, this is turning into a physical symptom. And I was like, I'm sorry, but does this person that we're channeling right now, were they a smoker? Because I keep smelling, I'm like covered in smoke.
I was there.
Yeah, and I'm like, I can't stop coughing now. I had to stop and take a drink of water. They're like, my whole family, everyone that passed that you're channeling, they were all smokers. Heavy smokers.
She said that the house always smelled like smoke. And she said that she wasn't very close with that side of the family, and anytime she gets a smell of cigarettes, she thought of them.
Yeah.
So that was, and like they smoked in the house, so it was very significant to her. And you also told her too, like you also got the sense of, without knowing this person at all, that there was some sort of religious issue with her and the family. And it was a very cool story because she had told you that she ended up telling you after that, yeah, I am actually a lesbian, and it's hard for my family to accept that about me. And you got a message from the other side saying that after they passed, they realized the error of their ways and that it's all love and acceptance, and that you really helped her. So that was really amazing. I That was one of the few times I was with you when you were doing a mediumship reading. I've been with you for a handful of times, but I think you're pretty modest about how much you actually help people. So that was really cool.
Well, thank you. It's nice because to me, it's like I'm just sharing what I get.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, to have that feedback is really cool.
The next one we're going to talk about is called clairgustance or clairgustance, depending on who you ask. It is the sense of taste, food that a loved one has tasted, a special meal.
This reminds me of the story I shared earlier with my grandpa, the beer that I tasted. That's a perfect example.
That is a really good one. Another one is a story we had about a friend who was trying to connect with her father. There was nothing coming through at first, and then the name Mark came through. That was kind of put out of sight, out of mind, because we knew that his name wasn't Mark, but then there was something else that popped in, and Mark kept popping in. And then a taste of a Big Mac, which was really interesting. And then all of a sudden, you had this Claire knowing that it was Mark McGuire. The connection there was Mark McGuire. And it turns out her dad used to talk about Mark McGuire every single night at the dinner table. So that was a very cool experience.
And you tasted the Big Mac.
It was a really neat thing, yeah, for her to be so excited. That was a message from my dad.
That's beautiful. Let's talk about clairtangency now. This is clear touch. Okay, a lot of people refer to this as psychometry. And this is basically a download of information after touching something. So a handshake, a hug, petting an animal, or even if you have an object that you're holding, you can get impressions from that object through the energetic field of the object. So you might have heard a psychic say they need something that once belonged to an individual to try to connect with them, and this would be an example of that. And I actually have two, once again, personal stories.
Ooh. I'm excited. I have not heard these.
Yes.
I'm very excited.
So these happened, once again, before I knew what the heck was going on, and now hindsight's 2020, and it makes a lot of sense now. But at the time, I was kind of like freaking out, thinking I was going crazy. Okay, so my family has an heirloom farm, and it's a century farm. So that means it's been in the family for 100 years. The people that lived on this little house on the farm, I mean, this was an old house. They didn't have plumbing. They had an outhouse.
Wow.
They did not have running water in the house. This was old. They were living in...
Before indoor plumbing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously passed away.
Yeah.
But the house remained on the family farm. But over time, the house deteriorated, and it was left vacant for a very long time. The time had come where it was kind of becoming a danger to be around. The house, it was so decrepit. You know, my family decided to bulldoze it, knock it down, make it flat. So before that happened, my dad went in and got some sessions that were left in the house, but, you know, after they had passed. Yeah. And one of those things it was a typewriter.
Oh, that's
And
neat.
so I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'd like to have
cool.
the typewriter. I was like, maybe I'll set it out and I'll have it look like it's typing a message, like as decoration. I was like, oh, you know, it's a family, something that was in the family.
Yeah.
So they're like, sure, you can have the typewriter. So, you know, they give me the typewriter, and I'm like, okay, cool. I touch it. I'm looking at it. I'm feeling it. I'm like, this is cool. That night I go to bed, and as I'm laying in bed, I cannot sleep. And I'm like, what is going on with the typewriter? I know it's not haunted because this is a family member. I never met the family member, but everyone told me he was so nice. They're like, oh, he was so nice, so sweet. I'm like, it's not haunted. Like, no one else had the typewriter after him. Why am I feeling so unsettled? And I literally couldn't sleep with that typewriter in my house. And it was giving me a bad feeling.
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I feeling? And I realized I was feeling alone. And I don't like being alone.
Yeah.
It's really spooky to me. And then I realized that typewriter had been sitting in that house, that vacant house, for years by itself in the woods.
Oh.
So talk about alone.
Yeah.
And I was picking up on the energy of the typewriter.
Yeah.
And I felt so alone in my house. And I was like, I feel like I'm in the middle of the woods alone.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't have that. It was freaking me out. I had to get rid of the typewriter.
Did it go away after that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And now I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Clairtangency. That's what that was.
Yeah.
By the time, I'm like, the typewriter's haunted. It's making me feel like I'm in the woods by myself, and I don't like it. It's so, like, can you imagine, like, being in the woods by yourself at night, and there's, like, nothing around, and you just hear, like, the animals chirping, you're alone.
Maybe
like,
he felt kind of alone during his life, too. Maybe his energy was imprinted on that somehow.
It could be. I don't know.
Yeah.
That'll be a mystery, because I didn't know him, you know?
Yeah.
But that... Oh, okay, I have one more. One more to share. So this is my grandma's brother. My grandma's passed. So when he was alive, he came to visit my family, and we knew he had cancer, and we knew he probably didn't have that much longer. Now, he lived out of state. I didn't have really a relationship with him. I met him here and there at some family functions, but I really didn't know him that much.
Mm-hmm.
There was no like bond, right? So he comes over to family dinner. We're sitting there. Everything's fine. I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I knew in my, like, this is probably the last time I ever see him. But like I said, I didn't really know him. So there was no reason for me to be upset by that. Like, of course, it's sad.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I didn't have a bond with this person. I didn't really know him
Yeah.
to where I would be sad.
Yeah.
So when we were leaving, we were saying goodbye. I'm still feeling fine. Like, okay, I'm kind of sad, but whatever, you know. That sounds like, not that kind of sounds, a certain way. But I'm just trying to paint the picture here.
No, yeah. You kind of don't want to make it about yourself.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make it like about myself. Yeah. So all of a sudden, I give him a hug goodbye, and there was like a shift in energy. Like everything that he was feeling went into me, and I started bawling my eyes out. I was like, oh my God, like, he just shared how he was feeling.
Wow.
Like, he knew.
That was a download.
It was a download. And my
yeah.
mom has had that too. With my great-grandpa who passed, he hugged her goodbye, and it was the last time she saw him, and the same thing happened to her.
Yeah.
And this happened with him, though.
And you and your mom are both Aquarius moons.
Yes.
Pull out my astrology knowledge.
Yes.
But if you know anything about Aquarius moons, actually, somebody in our comment section had asked us about Aquarius. So this is a good time for me to jump in. Aquarius energy can be very aloof, not always connected. It sits opposite Leo. It can be, I'm a Cancer moon, so it's very different. We feel everything. Aquarius moons are the water bearer. You know, you're kind of looking outside of everything as it's poured into something else. And yeah, you're not super emotional about things. Like, you can look at things from an outside perspective and just be like, it is what it is.
That's true. You won't catch me crying.
Yeah. So completely different energies there. We are on different sides of that spectrum. For me to hear that you felt that way and you cried, that's something.
It was bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like,
and your mom too.
Yes, and both times it's like, that wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally felt how he felt. Like, he knew, this is the last time I'm seeing you guys. I'm probably going to pass away after this. I didn't really like that. I'd rather connect with somebody after they've passed, because then they realize, hell yeah, like, I'm in the paradise. Like, their vibes are high. But somebody who's not sure and they're about to pass, it's kind of lower vibrational. And I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I didn't like it. Now that I have the hindsight.
Now, the last category we're going to talk about is, how do you pronounce it?
Clairsentience.
Clairsentience. It's feeling what other people are feeling. Sometimes this is spirit coming through to show you how they passed, or something physical sensation in the body that they might have experienced while being alive. You have experiences with this, right? When reading people?
Absolutely. A lot of the time when I'm doing a mediumship reading, people will tell me how they passed through clairsentience.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, I don't mind doing it when it comes to that, but outside of that, I don't really like feeling what other people are feeling, because sometimes it's not always good.
Yeah.
And I can always read someone very well if I decide to tap into their energy.
No, that's not usually about people who have passed, right? Because usually on the other side, like you said earlier, it's all good. Usually it's like a heavenly feel that you get.
Oh my gosh.
That you like.
It's pure ecstasy.
Yeah.
Yes. That I like.
Yeah.
So
just to know, if you have had anybody who has passed, that you don't have to worry about them being tormented or anything.
Yeah. So, if you had somebody who was a grouch and they were just a big old Debbie Downer.
Curmudgeon.
If I am channeling them and I'm like, oh, this person's in heaven, they're in bliss, you would be like, nope, that doesn't sound like the person I know. Mm-hmm. So they are. Everyone's
you had
like
a
that.
Story, though, of somebody who, at first, he was showing you himself as being a Debbie Downer, kind of sitting hunched over, wearing a big, oversized leather jacket, and had a glass of whiskey in his hand.
Yes.
And then the girl was like, that's my uncle. And then you saw him on the beach, right?
Yeah.
And he was dancing.
Yes. So they give you the validating information, but they're not feeling those negative emotions once they're over there. I promise you. I've never channeled a spirit. Never. Mm-hmm. And they only show that to have the sitter recognize who they are. Yeah. And then they show me what they're really doing. Yeah. And that part, oh my gosh. It's a beautiful surprise party for everyone. Yeah. One day. Yeah.
So Brianna also is very big on, anyone can do this. Everyone has this ability within them. And you were trying to get me to channel your grandma. You're like, she comes through all the time. And I was like, okay, right, I can do this. You were like, try to see her name. And I was like, I can't do this. And you're like, what's the first letter of her name? And I was like, I don't know. This was a clear knowing. I was like, it's D. I don't know why. I don't know why, but it is D. And I was like, yes! Yeah, she was so excited. We were kind of up late. It was my a birthday, 30th
It's your 30th birthday. That's
birthday.
very
No,
significant.
we have been drinking champagne, and I was like, it's D. And I was like, it's DOR. And I got this weird feeling. I was like, I don't know. And at this point, I was very skeptical.
I was so proud.
It was like, I don't know. It's not Dorothy. I know it's, I feel like it's DOR. It's not, but I feel like it's not a name I had ever heard of, and I just knew that. And her name,
her name is Dorla.
Yeah, I had never.
And so Spirit uses what's in. They use your brain as a bank of words. So if you've never heard that name, of course you wouldn't. Be able to. But it's the fact that you've got DOR.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, what are the chances?
Well, and I knew it wasn't something I had ever heard before.
Yeah.
And then you encouraged me to keep going. I described to you what she looked like, and then I had these. You're like, you are a blank slate. Like, I could not read you. I was trying not to read you, but I had no idea.
Aquarius moon.
I had no idea if I was on the right track or not. And you kind of walked me through some exercises on how to do it, trying to relax. And I got these shooting pains at the back of my legs. And I was like, was there something with the legs? And you were like, yes. Very monotone. Yes. Like, I had no idea. And you're like, pull a tarot card to see. And so this is one of the things that goes back to tarot too. It's not always about reading the definition of the card. I looked at it and I saw this image of a guy riding a horse. That was the actual image, but his leg was popping in and out. And I kind of brushed it off because I thought, oh, she probably had circulation issues or something. I kind of ignored it. But then I saw the arm was popping in and out too. I was like, it's a limb. And it was one of her legs, right?
Yes.
Had been removed. Yeah,
yes.
Amputated. And that was just, I mean, I felt it. So it is very different if you practice the stuff to experience it yourself. Because if you go somewhere and meet someone, you might have doubts. But if you learn to do it yourself, it can really dissolve some of those doubts and really make you feel more comfortable about what is going on. And it can raise a lot of questions. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you probably have some questions or some knowledge of the spiritual world already.
Yeah. And, if you're wondering, which of these clairs do I have? Which are the strongest for me? Which way does Spirit really communicate with me? I would suggest sitting in silence and asking Spirit for a sign and then seeing which of the clairs they use to give you the sign.
Yeah.
And then you'll realize, okay, this is my strongest clair. And then pay attention to that, the way that comes. And that's probably your strongest clair. And how I honestly, I was looking at these and Spirit uses all of these.
Yeah. Probably
the most would be clairvoyant and clairaudient for me, but they use all of them, and then I have to weave it together to make a message.
Yeah.
So pay attention, you guys. I hope that this gives you guys a deeper understanding of if you're psychic and how to tap into those abilities.
Mm-hmm. Or if you want to go and see someone and you have no idea what they're doing or what they're talking about when they say, I'm getting this or I'm feeling this, and this is how they're doing it.
Yeah, you guys stay tuned for more episodes because next week we're going to be talking about mediumship. And I know that goes hand in hand with everything we just talked about here, but we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and we're going to help you guys know how to tune in to your own spirits.
Yeah, and you said, and I've heard this before, not all mediums, or all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums?
Yes.
Is that maybe the thought behind it?
Mm-hmm. Whole different energy. So you guys, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We are on all different platforms. If you want to write into the show, you can email sunsoulandtarot@gmail.com and your story might be featured on our next podcast. I'm so happy that you're here with us to delve into these mysteries of the metaphysical world. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.